Imagine a flame so delicate that a gentle puff of wind could snuff it out. Imagine that flame carried across 7 continents, cheered on by millions. And then imagine a spirit so strong that even the wildest gale could not defeat it. Put them together and you have the ingredients for great drama, for the pinnacle of human achievement against all odds. You have the Paralympic Games. The eyes of the world were watching. The hopes and fears of athletes from around the world were running through the streets as that small flame approached Sydney, Australia. And as the date for the Paralympic Games drew closer, the excitement mounted. But our story begins many thousands of miles away from Australia, on another continent, at another time. A story of struggling for the best, sometimes winning, often losing. But above all, a story of what it truly means to be victorious. This is the story of 2 men, linked by a common destiny. Both men competed for the highest prize, but even though there was only one victor, both men ended up winning the crown of life. Niel Louw is an athlete who competes to win, but there was a time when he thought that he had lost everything.
We were on holiday at Swartvlei in the Southern Cape, and on the 26th of December 1984, we were towing a catamaran down a dirt road towards the lake when the mast touched overhead power lines. 11,000 volts surged through our bodies. We were shocked unconscious, and medically speaking, it was a miracle that we survived that accident. Although we had to undergo certain skin drafts, other operations, amputations, we haven't sustained any serious internal injuries or brain damage, which could have easily been the case. It was a very difficult time. I experienced pain, discomfort, frustration, despair. I didn't know what I would have been capable of. Would I ever be able to compete in sport again? Will I ever be able to live a normal life? How will my family and friends relate to me? And I had to undergo several months of rehabilitation, which also required a lot. And during that time in hospital, I became increasingly aware that nothing could separate me from God's love. It was as though as He was there all of the time. I experienced His presence, His comfort, His closure, His care for me personally. I don't want to say it was an easy time, and it was not as if God turned my circumstances around, but He strengthened me and enriched me and enabled me to deal with the situation and to be victorious in it.
Elliot Mujaji is another man who has lived through pain and loss, but has won through to victory. A promising athlete at the time of his accident, Elliot spent his days working as an electrician on an asbestos mine.
It was on the 3rd of January 1998 on a Saturday when he came to rectify a problem on a cable which had a fault which had lasted for about 3 weeks. So we rated our ladder, then I went up first and the second guy was following up. So when we were halfway up, the other guy was following up. He told me to go up a bit before I'd put on my safety belt. And I made just a small slight movement up. That's when I had a heavy shock on my shoulder. Then I found myself from the ladder hanging up and getting some burns, and could see some fire blowing up. And after that, I became unconscious. Then I fell down after about five minutes.
Elliot was rushed to the mine hospital. His body was in a terrible state. His right arm and chest extensively burned by the shock. His legs and lower stomach were burned as well. from the contact with almost 12,000 volts of electricity.
Elliot arrived at the hospital in a really shocking state. He was in a bad state. He was admitted in our surgical ward, and at that point in time, all the nurses, the doctors rushed in to try and help him. He had his right arm almost off, and he had a deep gash, really wound over his stomach. And in that stage, everybody, one of the nurses was sent to come and call me as a matron. I assisted in the dressing of the wounds. It was bad.
The doctors told me that when they took me to the hospital, I asked him not to touch me before a priest came to give a prayer. So he told me that when a priest was called, he gave a prayer, and then I coughed blood. Then the doctor said, and the priest said I had already survived. And all the time when I was in hospital, the priest said he knew I had already survived the accident, because I believed that the Lord was with me and he had a plan in my life.
After the accident that I was involved in, and after I've realized that I've been given a second chance in life, I put in an effort to really serve him more diligently and more enthusiastically as before. And at that stage, it dawned on me that it's very important to actually know what his will is and what it entails.
Like treasure found, the will of God shines brightly through the miracle of survival. But interpreting that will needs special times of prayer and reflection.
Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. His mother had named him Jabez, saying, "I gave birth to him in pain." Jabez cried out to God of Israel, "Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm." And God granted his request.
For both Elliot and Niel, even though their way of asking God for guidance differed, everything God said to them in these times pointed to Sydney and the Paralympic Games. Recovering from his injury in Zimbabwe, Elliot Mujaji appeared to be out of the loop for the Games. His injury needed rehabilitation, and that meant physical training. Elliot spent most of the time prior to leaving for Australia on the track, often running alone, in solitude.
I feel very comfortable training by myself, especially on this track. When there is no one around watching me, people sometimes wonder where I get the power from, where I get the speed, and every time when I'm doing my training, I ask the strength from the Lord, and I know that the Lord is with me every time, and He is guiding me, and I know when to ask for power and for whatever I like in my life.
On your mark. Pressure teen die blok Niel.
Being the fastest disabled man in Africa, thanks to his win in the 1999 All-Africa Games, meant that Niel stood a good chance of a medal at the Paralympics. But before leaving, Niel, as part of the group chosen to represent South Africa, had to sweat out the practices with the rest of the team.
It was wonderful actually to know that amongst the nations of the world, I mean, there were 120 countries approximately represented at the Games, and to know that I was a member of the South African team, and it was a truly united team representing all spheres of life in South Africa, and to be there with the top elite team actually competing against the best athletes in the world. It was a privilege. It was wonderful. It was special, and I will truly have the memories about that.
Australia.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon. Benvidos. Tolofa. Vitam vas. Ayu pavon. Allah wa salam. My name is Serena Grattan and I'm Deputy Mayor of the Paralympic Village. And it's my great pleasure to extend to you a warm welcome to the Paralympic Village. This is a true global village.
A warm welcome came from the chaplains, led by Johnny Erickson Tada from the United States.
Well, I am so thrilled to be asked to serve as a chaplain in the Paralympic Village. And of course, that means that I'm buzzing about in my wheelchair up and down the streets of the village, connecting with athletes, exchanging pins, asking about special prayer needs, and inviting people to come to either the morning worship services or the afternoon praise sessions or the Bible studies. A lot of the athletes are coming out of curiosity. Many of the Christian athletes with disabilities are bringing their friends. It's great fun.
As chaplain to the athletes, she needed insight into both their spiritual and physical disabilities.
Knowing that one of our people is one of...
The Bible makes it clear that God has redeemed us to make us more like Christ, to conform us to the image of the Son. And nobody endured hardship and suffering more than the Lord Jesus Christ. And I don't think the servant should be above the master. If he who learned obedience from his suffering, it says of Christ in the book of Hebrews, then we should expect to follow the same path. The Lord allows suffering for the purpose of making us more like himself. And I can't imagine wanting to escape that.
I was attending a prayer meeting at the religious center in the Paralympic Village. And during that meeting, I met Elliot Mujati from Zimbabwe. And my first impression of him was actually that he's really a down-to-earth, humble man seeking God's face. And I also realized that he really came to terms with his disability. I mean, it was only 2 years prior to that games actually that he had been involved in a similar accident than mine, a freak electrical accident. And I really realized that he had coped with his disability and that he really overcome it, and that he was triumphant in the midst of the adversity actually that struck him.
I was electrocuted and this side of my, so I was amputated. And I've got several bands around my body. Yeah, when I had an accident here, I could see through up to here. It was terrible. Yeah. But now I'm feeling strong. Yeah.
And going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
The two of us, we were in the same class competing, same category, T46, which actually means that both of us have one arm amputated. In our case, also a high above the elbow amputation. And I realized that he would be one of the favorites, the hot contenders for the gold medal, especially in the 100 and 200 meters. I was really looking forward to our race on the 24th of October 2000. And yes, I think it was almost as if we had something in common, and it was the beginning of a friendship. And it was great. Being both children of God relying on God for our strength and glorifying Him in our participation. It was as if the emphasis was not so much on the winning as such as on the privilege actually to compete with a disability. And I mean, it was a matter that the competition was tough, and any one of us could win the race.
Welcome, Paralympic athletes. Welcome, world, to the 11th Paralympic Summer Games, Sydney 2000. The Paralympic Games are about sport, culture, and fellowship. So we will spend the next 10 days enjoying the spirit of fair play and sportsmanship exhibited by our athletes as they become acquainted with old and new friends from all over the world. Good luck to all of you.
The Paralympic Games is the second largest sporting event in the world, following the Olympics. The athletes compete in 18 disciplines, from athletics to volleyball. Athletes with various disabilities compete in classes designed especially for visually impaired athletes, those with physical disabilities, those who are mentally challenged, and many classes in between. With the challenge of 11 tough days of competition ahead, the contestants pushed on towards the gold. Winning is hard. But when winning is everything, losing can be even harder. For both Elliot Mujaji and Niel Louw, the gateway to the gold was through the semi-finals. Being amongst the top contenders, the 200 and 100 meter men's semis were a formality to them, or so it seemed.
I can remember it was a cloudy, it was a rainy day, not ideal weather actually for competition, but I was so motivated, I was so well prepared, I was focused, and I really trusted that God would provide the strength and the ability just for me to give my best. I remember I had a wonderful start, and it was during the first few seconds of the race that I've been realizing that I was in front, and I couldn't see any of the other contenders, and the next moment, split of a second, it was as if a knife slashed through my muscle. I was surprised, astonished. I couldn't remain or maintain my momentum, my speed. I was affected just there and then. The next moment, the whole bunch of athletes just passed me by and left me behind. And I was finishing the race, but I was standing there in pain. I mean, it was just as if the worst has happened. 2 nights later, in the middle of the night, I woke up, and the reality of what actually had happened struck me, and I was really disappointed. I was sad, and it was as if there was no answers actually to my questions. I mean, on paper I was a medal contender, and many of the team members and even the media regarded me as a potential winner. So I prayed, and in some way or another I really experienced God's presence and His peace, His comfort, His care, and I knew that He was still in control. And I opened my Bible and I was reading from Nehemiah in the Old Testament. It was Nehemiah 8 verse 10, which says that the joy of the Lord is my strength. When I was reading it, it dawned on me that the joy I have in Jesus Christ is not dependent on emotional fluctuations, on changed circumstances, but it's actually based on a personal living relationship with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords.
With With Niel Louw out of the running with a badly torn hamstring, Elliot knew that if he wanted to finish in the medals, he would have to beat the favourite, Tim Matthews, from Australia.
When I prepared for the race, I never thought I was going to make it. Was first of all, when I ran the heats, overall I was on 30 position. And the time when I went for the finals, I just thought maybe I was going to be the third, to come third.
They're set. Away well this time. Mujaji from Zimbabwe got a brilliant start. Matthews running well. The two Chinese athletes, Zhao and Liang, on the inside. It's going to be tight. Matthews coming quickly. Zhao and Liang. And on the outside, Mujaji is very tight between Liang from China and Mujaji from Zimbabwe. Liang in lane 2. And Mujaji gets it. 11.13. Liang from China, 11.14. And Matthews, 11.15.
Winning gold in the 100-metre sprint confirmed Elliot Mujaji as the fastest disabled man in the world.
I knew if I could, I was only waiting for the gun, not to see what people were doing, and I just knew the Lord was with me, and everything was going to be well for me.
Paralympic champion and gold medalist, representing Zimbabwe, Elliot Mujaji. Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of Zimbabwe.
Okay, I have to be an example, a true example in life. That whenever people say that you have to be like Elliot, they don't mean that I have to be. They have to be like me, like in running. No, they have to be like me to be a good believer in Jesus, and they know that I survived the accident. Not because I was strong, not because of the doctors, but because of the Lord Jesus Christ.
It is with personal sadness, but great, great pride that I hereby declare the 11th Paralympic Summer Games of Sydney closed.
When I was 16, I wouldn't have imagined that I will one day sit here with one arm, that my life would have turned out the way it did. I mean, I've had so many opportunities to tour around in the world, to meet so many people at so many different places, to compete on international level. I mean, it's just amazing. And if I think back to Joshua in the Old Testament in the Bible, where he said, "For me and my household, we will serve the Lord." I also made that decision many years ago, and if I look back in retrospect, I realized that it materialized in my life as well. I mean, I realized that God has a plan and a purpose for my life, and that by serving Him diligently and enthusiastically, with my eyes focused on Him, He has been blessing me in so many different ways. And I can testify about a life in abundance, a life within God's perfect and complete will, having a personal, dynamic, living relationship with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords.
At times, you cannot lead a life without ups and downs, but you know, it's a better way of life which I'm leading than people who doesn't know Jesus.